Hey everyone, it's Alex here, and I am working on a script for a new episode of Movie Questions Answered, so I'm really hoping to have that out soon. But in the meantime, I do want to do something special. As most people know, I'm a pretty big Michael J. Fox fan, and, he was one of the first people who, I didn't just think of him as, for his roles. I thought I knew who he was. And, his show got canceled recently, which I was bummed about. Kind of bummed about the actual product of the show, but that's a whole nother story. But I'm really hoping that even if the show didn't turn out well, I'm really hoping that he gets back on the horse and starts doing more stuff. I'm really proud of the fact that he is working again through his Parkinson's and, not letting it be a handicap. But I also want to take the time to point out, one of the problems I feel his Parkinson's has brought on his career is that I feel that people have overlooked what a good actor he really is. He's not just someone who has Parkinson's, but he was funny, he was charismatic, he had charm, he could play dramatic roles, he could play funny roles. So today I'm going to count down my top 10 favorite roles. And there's a reason I'm emphasizing the word roles, not films, because he's done a lot of TV roles, a lot of regular TV roles, a lot of guest appearances, a lot of voiceover work. So I'm including those. Because you know what? They were good performances. They should count. Number 10, Kevin Casey from Scrubs. I should probably elaborate what a big deal this part was when I first heard about it, because when I heard he was going to be on Scrubs, it had been a long time since he had done anything. He retired in 2000 because of his Parkinson's. He did a few voiceover jobs, like I mentioned. He had a cameo in the movie Interstate 60. Sorry to say, but I haven't seen it yet. But he was not in anything for a while, so I really thought that he was gone for good, pretty much. But then he did Scrubs, which I was excited about because I also watched Scrubs very regularly at the time. It was one of my favorite shows at the time. And, it wasn't just some throwaway performance. He appeared in 2 episodes. He was a likable character. He was just the doctor that everybody wanted to like. And, with Fox's personality, that's the kind of role that it makes sense that he's playing. But he was also someone who was battling OCD, and you could tell that Fox was bringing his knowledge of dealing with a disability, because even if it is a completely disability from the one he deals with, you could tell that he was playing a character who had experience with this. When he's struggling with not being able to when he keeps washing his hands, you can tell that he's dealing with the stress of being someone who can't stop washing his hands. And, the role was good, and I think it deserves a mention because he started acting a lot more after this. He did appearances on The Good Wife, he did a very funny cameo on Curb Your Enthusiasm, he did a role on Phineas and Ferb, he got the Michael J. Fox show up and running. Yeah, I'm very grateful for this part. It was a good part, and it really seemed to get him back on the horse. Number 9 is a tie between Milo Thatch from Atlantis: The Lost Empire and Stuart Little in the Stuart Little films. Okay, I'll admit that it's kind of a cheat to make him a tie, but it's my list and I shall cheat if I wish to. Besides, I think that both of these roles deserve to be on the list, and if I put them both here, I feel like I'd just be repeating myself, so I'd rather just lump them together than repeat myself. What I think made them great is that I don't always think that a lot of actors get doing voiceover work, and I think Michael J. Fox is one of the guys who really is good at doing voiceover work, because you know he's got a very recognizable voice, but he really does bring a lot of his personality to the roles of Milo Thatch and Stuart Little, because you know, he kind of brought that a little bit with Milo Thatch. He brought a lot of quirkiness and eccentricity that I really liked. With Stuart Little, you know, you know, before it was known that he had Parkinson's, Michael J. Fox had a reputation for being a very boyish actor, and I think that's why Stuart Little was such a good part for him, because he does have a lot of boyish charm. And if we're splitting hairs, I think I liked Atlantis more as a film, because I just like movies like that, you know, adventure, comedy, romance, stuff like that. But I felt like he brought a little more to Stuart Little, just because it's hard for me to imagine anybody else playing that part. Also, if we're going to split hairs even further, I actually liked Stuart Little 2 a little more than the first one, just because I thought they got a little more mileage out of what could be done with him. The first Stuart Little was an entertaining movie. You know, you had you know, a mouse joining a family. That's cute, but I think I like the second one more, because I got more mileage out of it with him as, you know, he had his own car, he had his own plane, he got lost in the city, and they showed the perils of that. So, you know, the two movies that were released in theaters, pretty entertaining, but, you know, if you twisted my arm, I'd probably pick the second one. Number 8, Dwight from Rescue Me. I must confess that one of the differences between this role and the Scrubs role is that while Scrubs was a show I was watching a lot when Michael J. Fox guest starred, I didn't watch Rescue Me that much. I kind of just clocked in to see Fox and kind of clocked out. This is actually a very important role for Fox, and it's one he actually likes talking about a lot. He brings up in his second book. He actually talked about it when I saw him live. He said that he was approached for the part, and this is the story he likes to tell. They told him, hey, we want you to play this embittered drug addict character. He's embittered, he's angry at the world. What part of this makes you think me? Well, you have to understand he's paralyzed from the waist down. You know I can't stop moving, right? But he brings up the reason that this character is important to him, because he talks about how this is the exact kind of person he didn't want to be. He didn't want to be someone who's embittered at the world. He didn't want to play someone who lets his handicap get in their way. And he experienced people that were like that, and you know, it's very commendable that he has been someone who's, you know, taken his disability with the optimism and the grain of salt that he has. This was another interesting part, because he was still very much going against type. You know, I was talking about the Scrubs role. That was you know, again, that was the sort of thing people expected from him, playing the nice guy, the guy that people like. But you know, this time he was playing a very mean-spirited, very angry character, and you know what? He did a very good job. He was actually very intense, and you know, his Parkinson's does show up as he's having a little. You can tell that he was having a little difficulty controlling it, and I actually kind of thought that worked. It made him seem very on edge, very kind of like a very antsy, very edgy character. So You know what? I give him a lot of kudos for being able to channel his issue that way. Number 7 is Frank Bannister from The Frighteners. This was actually one of the last movies he made before he went into retirement, and I think it's safe to use that term loosely now because of his Parkinson's. It is an interesting film. I like the fact that he uses his nice guy charm in this film to play sort of a huckster, to play sort of a con artist, because what he does is he can see ghosts after a near-death experience. So he uses this trick to use the ghosts that he controls to haunt people, and then he goes over and plays Ghostbuster at their houses. Things get a little sticky when he's the only one that can see the ghost of a murderer who's killing people. But I'm kind of split emotionally, because I really like it on its face, because it is a really effective horror movie, but at the same time, it starts on such a good premise, with him playing this huckster, this fake Ghostbuster. I kind of wish it had stuck to that premise, because that is the most entertaining part of the movie. It's still a really good movie. This is coming from someone who's not normally a horror movie fan. I still recommend it. It entertains me. I watch it almost every Halloween, and you know, judging it on the basis of Michael J. Fox's performance, he does a really good job. Number 6, Mike Flaherty from Spin City. Spin City really was a good use of his talents, because he played a character that really, on paper, was not exactly an everyman. I mean, they acknowledged early on that he was the youngest district mayor in New York history. In one of the earlier episodes, he's voted the sexiest man in New York. There's an episode that centers around him dating Heidi Klum, actually multiple episodes, but I digress. But at the same time, he still brought a lot of everyman quality. You know, he had to juggle realistic problems like laying off workers with funny problems like convincing a kid that Santa Claus is real. If you haven't seen that episode, it is so good. It's actually one of Michael J. Fox included it on his list of personal favorites. Watch the episode and you'll see why it is so funny. Spin City was very much an ensemble show. He had a lot of funny characters to work with. He had the mayor who was childish and goofy. He had Paul who was money-grubbing and selfish. He had Stuart who was an absolute rake. And even though he was surrounded by these crazy characters, he never felt overwhelmed. He was always on par with them. He was always able to match up with them. He always had funny lines with them. He had chemistry with them. Number 5, Louis Rothschild from The American President. It's kind of funny comparing this role back to back with the Spin City role. It's sort of like comparing the Scrubs role with the Rescue Me role. You have two similar personalities, or rather two similar roles, where they're people who, you know, it seems like their lives just went in, and their personalities just went in different directions. I mean, going off of Spin City again, you know, Mike was a character who was very likable, very personable, very friendly, very jokey. But his character in The American President is a little more businessy. He's, you know, I mean, he works for the president. That cannot be an easy job. But, you know, he's a little more bullheaded. He's a little more blunt in telling the president that he doesn't think he's making the right choices and that he needs to get back to business. For those of you who haven't seen this movie, it's about the president, played by Michael Douglas. He re-enters the dating scene. His popularity begins to dwindle a lot, and I think it's a very good commentary on how we sometimes overlook the president's issues and look more at his personal life. Obviously a much bigger deal in the mid-90s than it is now, but That's still a very fascinating character study. Fox's character, it is interesting. He's a bit of a firecracker in this film. He loses his temper a lot, and it is interesting because it's another one where he goes against type. So it is interesting seeing him less as the everyman, more as someone who's more business and more and he'll push the buttons, and I described him as a firecracker. He's a short guy and he's very boyish looking, so it is kind of entertaining watching him play this more feisty character. Plus he really does bring a lot of energy to it. You really do get the feeling that this is someone whose job is really the stress of his job really is getting to him. The American President is a very good movie. I really do recommend it. It's kind of funny. As a kid, since I did know who Michael J. Fox was, I actually kind of wanted to see this movie because he was in it. But I only saw it like a couple of years ago, and it's probably for the better that I waited, because I think I can appreciate what this movie's about more as an adult than I would have as a kid. Number 4, Dr. Benjamin Stone in Doc Hollywood. It's funny to think that despite Fox's nice guy image, he was still very good at playing cocky, very arrogant characters. And to be honest, I think his nice guy image really helped with that, because he could be the cocky, arrogant character, but still have that boyish charm. Doc Hollywood really is one of his best roles, because it's the perfect marriage of the cockiness, the arrogance, with the nice guy image, because Doc Hollywood is about a doctor who, he's moving to California to become a plastic surgeon, but he gets sidetracked when he wrecks his car, and he has to work as the town doctor. And he meets a lot of very eccentric characters while in town, people who use dynamite in fishing, people who visit him to make him read letters, and it is very funny. He plays a straight man, but his reactions are so funny. I love in one scene he's reading a letter to someone and it's like, oh, it ended there? I wanted to keep going. What happens? That stuff's very funny. And his character softens up a bit as he has a relationship with a woman he meets in town, and these are some very sweet scenes. I mean, I'll admit that I can be a little fastidious when it comes to romantic movies, because you gotta find the right balance between the fantasy of it and the sweet elements of it. And I think this movie really hits that right note of being sweet while not being overbearing with it. And there's a great scene at the fair where they're just dancing together. It's such a good scene. As much as I love Doc Hollywood, I must address the elephant in the room. It was while making this movie that Michael J. Fox actually first became aware of his Parkinson's. Now, for those of you who don't know, Michael J. Fox actually contracted Parkinson's at a very young age. Most people... I actually did my research on Parkinson's because I'm such a fan, but most people who get it are middle-aged. He was still in his 30s, and he was in what he viewed to be the prime of his career. He was just in his hotel room, and his pinky was trembling, and he couldn't get it to stop, and the rest is history. Number 3, Erickson from Casualties of War. Casualties of War was a film that Fox made when he was trying to escape the image of being a lightweight, boyish comedic actor and do more serious films. And I really think this was a good compromise for him, because it's a very serious film. It deals with the Vietnam War and a group of soldiers that kidnap a Vietnamese villager, but at the same time, Michael J. Fox plays the one good guy, the one guy who is willing to stand up to the rest of his platoon. I mentioned before in roles like The American President and Spin City how he wasn't overwhelmed. This is the one time where he does kind of seem overwhelmed, but he's still, you know, trying to stand his ground. And the fact that he's so much younger, a little good-humored, a little more boyish than everyone else really works in the film's favor, because it's like, you know, how does someone like this compete against, you know, someone with so much intensity as Sean Penn? If it were just 1 versus 1 with those two, it might be a tough place for him to be, but he is competing against an entire platoon, and he's still trying to stand his ground. There's a great line in the movie where he says, "I've got a gun! So do we!" And sadly, this movie wasn't a hit. Michael J. Fox himself was aware of it. He was actually kind of good-humored about it. He joked about it, how it came out the same time as Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. You know, he joked, you know, in one corner you've got Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, a movie you could take the kids, take your grandma, take your dog, and in my corner you've got Casualties of War, a hard-hitting Vietnam film. Not to mention, Fox himself starred in a big movie from 1989. You know what? This is a good time to talk about that one. Number 2, Marty McFly from the Back to the Future series. No surprise this one is on the list. I mean, you can't talk about Michael J. Fox's best roles and not talk about Back to the Future. And anybody who knows me personally is certainly not surprised, because I will be blunt. Simply put, Back to the Future is my all-time favorite film franchise. Case in point, my brother got me this for my birthday recently, the Lego DeLorean. Got the little Marty McFly figure in there. I remember sort of feeling like Indiana Jones in Last Crusade. It's like, Marcus, do you know how long I've wanted one of these? All of your life? All of my life. And yeah, it even has the hover conversion. Oh, this is just so cool. But back to the actual role. This is one of the few films on the list where Michael J. Fox got to reprise his role. And he played him through 3 movies. 3 movies that between them, I've probably watched more times than any other movie. I can't even count the times I watched the movies as a kid. Like, I don't remember marathoning a lot of other film franchises, but I would watch Back to the Future, like, back to back, though it helps that Back to the Future was also the only film franchise where I owned all 3 of the movies on tape. You know, as fun as these movies are, there really is a lot on his performance. You know, going in 3 movies, I mean, this is a character. Marty McFly is a character who goes through a lot. I mean, you know, wrapping his head around the fact that his best friend invented a time machine, that's a pretty big deal. And the fact, I mean, he goes back to the 50s, he meets his parents as teenagers, he almost has an affair with his mother, he visits the future, he visits alternate realities, He's hunted by people at gunpoint, he goes to the Old West, he has a showdown in the Old West. He has a lot thrown at him, but he still manages to come off like nothing is overwhelming him, but at the same time he still gives very natural, very believable reactions. plus he has, he and Christopher Lloyd have such amazing chemistry in this movie. I mean, they play off of each other perfectly. I love in the second movie, Doc, you're not gonna believe this! We have to go back to 1955! I don't believe it! Not to mention, there are so many funny moments, like the Johnny Be Good scene. That scene still cracks me up every time. I even quote it with friends. Give me a blues riff and B, watch me for the changes, and try to keep up. But I also he has a lot. He does have a lot of faces to his personality. I do like in the second movie. When it is revealed that he can be easily provoked, and I do like that because it's not the fact that he can be provoked easily, it doesn't make him come off like a bad person or a jerk. It just makes him seem like a regular guy. Like he has a bit of a wart, and it's not just a flaw he has. I mean, mild spoiler, it's a flaw he overcomes. I can't praise this series enough, but one thing I will say, I have always wanted to go as Marty McFly for Halloween. One teensy weensy problem, you know that down vest, the vest that everybody thinks is a life preserver in the first movie? Those things are expensive. Number 1. Alex P. Keaton from Family Ties. Okay, what gave away the fact that this was going to be number 1? Was it simply process of elimination after Marty McFly? Was it the fact that this was the role that made Michael J. Fox a star? Or there's something about this part that's very personal for me. Oh yeah, the fact that his name is Alex. In fact, my mother says I was named after Alex P. Keaton. Dad contends it was Alex Trebek, but obviously I wasn't there, so I can't tell you. But, I mentioned that this was the role that made Michael J. Fox a star, and it's very easy to see why. Fox said that when he first heard about the role, he was told to make him likable, and he just couldn't believe the prospect of doing that. He was a tie-wearing teenager. Not always necessarily a bad thing. He was selfish. He was money grubbing. I love in one episode when in one of my favorite episodes when he works with his dad Stephen at the station for a while. He says his dad revealed that he cried after seeing that the station was non-profit. That line always cracked me up, but he was money grubbing, he was selfish, but there were so many faces to his personality. I mean, first of all, this was one of the first chances where we got to see that that charm, that boyish charm he had. Plus, there were times that he had very good moments. I mean, he was pedantic. He was very articulate in his speech, and he kind of looked down his nose at anyone who wasn't as intelligent as he was. But at the same time, there was an episode where his sister Jennifer was in danger of being expelled for doing a book report on the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and he stood up for her. There's a great episode where his dad is self-conscious about having to give a speech, and he's actually there supporting him. I love what he tells him. Thomas Jefferson wasn't Thomas Jefferson until he became Thomas Jefferson. The one episode that I remember very well is My Name is Alex. Yeah, imagine that. It's very interesting because it's almost a one-man show, so it's a great episode because it's just this almost tour de force for Fox as he goes through all of his insecurities. You know, we learn he's a closet Doors fan in that episode. And, you know, he talks about some of the pressure, like the fact that he's the first person always called on to answer questions. Fox, he showed so many of his skills. He had funny lines. I love in one episode when their mom is parading out all their old toys, and, you know, he's being very snarky, like, so that, and he, you know, she pulls out, like, his old teddy bear, and he's like, that was really funny. Plus, he showed a great flair for physical comedy, which I think he was very underrated at. I think, you know, jokes about Parkinson's aside, Michael J. Fox was such a good physical comedian. I love in one episode, there's a very funny episode about them trying to find a cereal mascot, and he just brushes it off like, oh, why would you do something that silly? But then when he finds out there's a monetary reward, he just dashes across the kitchen banister, and I remember laughing so hard when I first saw that. Plus, I gotta love the Alex puns they came up with in so many episodes. Like, he claims that he's cooking a dish called Pasta Alex. It's like, oh, what's the recipe for that? And my personal favorite, when he finds out that there's a kid on the way, he buys a stuffed bear that has a voice recording saying, I love Alex! I'm just wondering, where do you get those? But that's my list. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I didn't get everything. I know there were some important films that I didn't touch on, and don't feel bad. I had to kick a few films I liked to the curb. Like, I couldn't talk about The Hard Way because, you know, there's only room for 10, and hey, I had to cheat to get all of them in there. But feel free to share some of your favorites. Really hoping to have the next episode of Movie Questions out soon. Until then,